Hey, welcome to the Propsmith channel. I'm Sean McBee, and this week we're talking about how to build Hourman's Hourglass from DC Stargirl. So if you've seen DC Stargirl, you are probably familiar with Hourman, the dude that wears an hourglass much like this around his neck and flips it over to give himself 1 hour of super strength per day. Now, I love this prop and many of the props from Stargirl, so I wanted to have it. But I'm also a little particular. So the props on the show, even the hero props, are made out of resin that's painted to look like brass. Now, you know me. When something looks like brass on a show, I want it to be made out of brass. So, I made it out of brass. Here we go. So I set out to replicate this thing exactly. Now, what's step one in making a replica? It's research, research, research. Always gather reference photos. Now, I'm going to have a whole video in my Prop Replication 101 series about gathering good reference photos. But in this case, I didn't have to do research. All I had to do was walk down to the props trailer and say, hey, let me get some photos of that hourglass. And that's what I did. So the first thing you want to do is, if you can ever find a photo, I'll cover this in that other video, but if you can find a photo of a prop with a ruler next to it, you are like golden. Because if you have a measurement, a known size in a photo, you can extrapolate basically all the other dimensions from that. I'll go over that in greater detail in that video, so hit that subscribe button so you don't miss it when it posts. But in the meantime, let's get discussing this. Now, I got really lucky in that I worked on the show, so I was able to get these photos of the hero prop with this ruler so that I had all the dimensions that I needed to get this done. Quick break. Let me just go over this real quick. I did make this while I was not taking a lot of videos of stuff, so mostly what we've got here is a bunch of photos of the process, and I hope that's going to do for you because that's what we got. But I'm really excited about this prop. I'm so happy with how it turned out. It might be my crowning achievement, and I want to share it with you as best I can. With all this reference material in hand, all my sizes known, the first step was to find the one part that I couldn't personally replicate, and that was the base hourglass. I did find the exact same size and shape hourglass to use for the base of this thing, and to save you the trouble, I've linked it down below in the description so you can go through and buy them. I'll tell you right now, buy several, even if you only want to make one hourglass, because I broke about 75% of them in the process of making this. More on that later. All right, so we have our hourglass, we have our dimensions, we have our general plans. My next step was to go into Adobe Illustrator and make vector files of the various shapes that make up the prop, including these brass arms, this top piece, etc. I laid it all out as a plan, and I made little acrylic guides to allow me to get the shape of these arms on my lathe, as well as the profile of these discs, which is a little beveled here with a flat end right on the edge. I don't know if you can see that. Beveled, beveled, flat. All of that I made vector files of, and then I did some laser cutting. I even made a full mock-up out of laser cut acrylic just to test fit everything, make sure that I had all my measurements correct, because when you're dealing with machining metal, you want it to be right 100% of the time. And from there it was go to this giant chunk of brass that I bought just for this purpose. I strapped it on into my mini lathe and got to cutting. So first thing, I experimented with putting the little dip there in the middle for the hourglass bulb parts to sit in. And it's also worth noting that there is a little lip right here that is part of this. It's not pasted on, it's machined in, a little lip to help hold this in. And I had the diameter of that lip as well. So you'll see here, I machined that in. This end piece is really just for experimenting, like with that bowl and that little baby lip there that isn't thick enough. But what I did is, you'll see I grooved in to separate this cylinder into individual discs. And I pushed that groove in to the point where this little lip would be. So you had this center bit holding them together that is the diameter of that lip. And the gap is much thicker than that lip because I need to cut these apart. So first step was getting that groove in there. You'll see it's all the way down in these last two, but the rest are in progress. And then using my little acrylic guide for the profiles, I started putting in this bezel here and then the bezel on the other side. And it looks really big in this photo, but it's just pretty close up. And then this is, I've cut the first disc off, which was my scratch disc here on the end. Just turned on the lathe, stuck a hacksaw in there, and just gently cut it off. So that left that lip there as I needed it, and then I went in and hollowed out that little dip for the bulbous end of the hourglass. And there's a test fit of that bulbous end in the hourglass in the still attached disc there. From there, I had all these discs. The next step was to flatten one end. So what I did was I took it to a belt sander with, I think, an 80 grit sandpaper on it, and I smoothed off this end until it looked flat, albeit very scratchy. And then I just gently took the ends and made these flat bits. And I used a guide to make sure that those flat bits were within the dimensions I had. So once it fit in there, I knew that that part was done. So this jig here you'll see is a two-function jig that I've made. I strapped it down really well to my drill press bed, and I used it for drilling the guide holes in both the base pieces where these little posts go, as well as the holes for this little chain holder in the arms. That's what the wider rectangular piece is. That puts this right in the center for me to drill a tiny hole in there. So you'll see this wider hole only goes down so far, and from there I then drill in a much smaller hole because this is a threaded piece that goes through here like a screw and screws into the arm, which has a threaded hole in the end. You'll see more of that later. For the arms themselves, they start off looking pretty rough. I did a few test fittings. You can see my first attempt at doing one of these arms was really atrocious. Further attempts sort of got better as it went. You'll see the one on the left here is pretty wonky looking. The one on the right is really getting there. And just after some trial and error, I did finally get them there. This is my first full assembly piece, the arms and the bases and the hourglass. My next step was to change out that black sand you see for yellow sand and get that color on the middle. Now here's where all the breaking came in. Because to get that black sand out, I had to drill a hole in the end of this hourglass. And most of them broke. And to get this collar on, I had to cut the whole hourglass in half. And you'll see in this photo how absolutely thick the glass is right there compared to everywhere else. I had to use a very thin glass cutting wire. Had to go through several to get through all of that. Just really take my time, keep it lubricated. Eventually I got through. And then I could just take the two ends, stick them on either side of the brass collar, and held them in with some Loctite UV cured glass glue, which works really well. Had to be careful not to block off the holes. Moving on, once I had all of this done, here it is, all test fit before I've added the yellow sand in. Then it's time to take it all apart and give it all a bath in brass black. If you look how shiny and bright that is not what it looks like on screen. It's too much. So we age it down with a brass black. I just gave all of this an age wash. And then once that's done, polish it back so that only the recesses are left dark. And then to replicate the look of the actual prop, I went through and sprayed a little bit of brass black on them here and there to give them some spots, and then went over it with some Mohawk brass lacquer to lock that amount of age in place. Then it was a matter of putting the sand in, fully assembling them, and that's the result. The chain also was just something that I was able to identify and find based on my photos, so that also linked in the description below. So there you have it, Hourman's Hourglass. Let me know what you think in the comments. Please let me know if you try to build one of these. I definitely want to see all of them. And don't forget to subscribe. I have so many more videos coming out. You're going to enjoy all of them. I've decided you're going to enjoy them. So there you have it. And then we'll see you around, buddy.